Every now and then, I meet someone who's changing the world for the better by their sheer will alone. Whether they're authors, activists, or adventurers, these people are blazing a path with their deep enthusiasm and allowing the world to follow. Their passion is strong, and my passion is to tell their stories. I am Brian Platt, and this is Passion Project. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This week I speak with Enrique Ortiz of the Andes Amazon Fund. So he talks about the forest fires, the current state of the Amazon, and he addresses some misconceptions about the Amazon itself. So in all these podcasts, I do my due diligence to come prepared with a few questions and talking points. But here, I kind of abandoned all that, abandoned everything I had, and just listened. He's super informed, very captivating, but above all, he's unwaveringly positive, which I love. And he should be. He's done a lot of hard work over decades, getting the Amazon from being roughly 5% of protected land to now currently 40%, which is incredible. So even though Andes Amazon Fund doesn't necessarily work in Brazil, we talk about Bolsonaro. It's kind of hard not to, especially when you're mentioning anything about the Amazon at all, since he is incentivizing people to destroy the rainforest, and really just prioritizing short-term economic growth over everything else, including the environment. All I gotta say is thank God we don't have anyone like that as president of the United States. Oh boy. But yeah, so, having said that, one of the big things we talk about is the current sensationalist news and a lot of doomsday approaches we've been hearing lately. So while it might work in the short term to get fast attention in media, he really cautions against it, as Enrique hasn't, seen any sustained efforts from it. Once you start panicking, you really can't unring that bell, and he thinks there's a lot of different ways of getting attention that doesn't involve people to panic and really just get the news out there in a better way. So one thing I do want to mention is audio quality. The call dropped at some point on Enrique's side, so I had to actually stitch together two tracks. You'll know it when you hear it, but just a heads up, it just might sound a little strange. But yeah, and so on a side note, I met Enrique because the company I work with, Yoko CO, redid his website, andesamazonfund.org. So if you're an association, a nonprofit, or really any organization with a passion beyond just pure profit, let us know. Drop us a line, especially if you need a new site or just need help with any ongoing marketing efforts. We'd love to work with you. So on that note, as always, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe when you hear this if you like it. And yeah, I really hope you enjoy this one. This is a really incredible one. Timely, but also I think just Enrique has a lot of, institutional knowledge that really can be applied to a lot of different parts of the conservation world. So I hope you enjoy and take care.
Enrique Ortiz is the program director of the Andes Amazon Fund. It's an organization committed to funding agencies that support conservation in the Andes Amazon region. Enrique has worked in the environmental field for decades and is trained as a tropical ecologist, conducting research on species and ecological systems in coastal areas, desert, highlands, and tropical forests. And he's a leader in biodiversity and ecosystem conservation. Welcome, Enrique.
Thank you, Brian, for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big pleasure of mine. So I really appreciate you taking the time for me, especially I know how busy you are right now.
Yeah, I just came from Bolivia a few days ago. I went to visit some sites that we are helping to protect, and I just happened to be in the areas where the forest is burning like crazy. Oh, what you saw in the news in the last weeks, that's the action where it was happening. So has been busy times in the last couple of weeks with all the big media exposure that Amazon fires and climate change has taken in the last few days, especially in the UN meetings. So anyway, busy times, but it is always like that.
Yeah, let's jump right in. What, that's obviously the biggest news in the past few months is the fires in the Amazon. How bad is it versus previous years? How bad has it been versus, what the media is saying?
Yeah. So let me tell you, what you read in the media is one story, which is very, I don't know what's the right word to say it, but it's very exaggerated in many ways. The Amazon is not burning like you see it in the news. Like, oh my God, the Amazon is burning, it's in fire. The Amazon doesn't burn like, for example, a temperate forest does, like what you saw in California or in other parts of the world. Uh, but what is burning is areas that have been already cut months ago, and happens that right now we are in the in the dry season. So the reason why you see so many fires is that this year is dry. It's not particularly the driest year, but because of policies, wrong policies by Brazilian president, by the Bolivian president, the number of huge areas have been cut already like months ago, and they just dry enough to be burned for using the land for one reason or the other, or land speculation or expansion of agriculture. So it is not that the Amazon is burning like a standing forest. Probably a small percentage, yes, at the edges is burning. But in general, the Amazon doesn't burn. It's too wet for that. Now, what is really burning is not really the Amazonian forest. It's more other types of forests that are dry forests in Bolivia and in Paraguay, for example. The area where I just came from, there was a fire that was like something in the order of 25 miles long, and there was another one on the other side. I was just about to join this one. But that is a very dry forest, with a layer that is probably, like 20 inches. That burns like crazy. But it's not properly the Amazon. And also, I would say probably 70% of the fires in that area are grasslands, what they call pampas,
Yeah.
which also dry, burning is somewhat part of a natural cycle. Unfortunately, whenever this happens, there is wildlife that is not able to run as much as a jaguar would do. But say if there is a sloth, or if there is a say an anteater, they don't run as much. So there is a loss, but it is not as it has been publicized. What is really true is that the trends that we see today are very high. So to me, more than a disaster, it is a premonition of what's just about to happen, which is policies that basically have incentivized major forest conversion, basically cutting the forest down for different reasons. Depends on the country, and the trends predict that deforestation rates in this year and probably in the next year will be probably the highest in history for some countries. So
Oh, wow.
so it is what you see, for example, the area has been burned in Brazil. It is only a fraction of what was burned last year. But when you see the news, you believe that everything in Brazil is burning, and it's not like that. It's a
Right.
very media product. But definitely, it is a very big red light blinking, saying, "Watch out! The policies that Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, is supporting are going to end up in a major disaster." So anyway, it is. I don't want to kind of opposed to the idea that yes, we need to do something. We need to do something, but I'm in general very much against doomsday approaches. I believe the idea that the world is ending is bad, because we have gained a lot, and we have actually a lot of progress, and we shouldn't be putting our heads in the holes because everything is burning and fucked up. It's not like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I appreciate about you. The fact that you don't see things as a doomsday scenario, right? Because I think when someone starts to see things that way, especially when they're in a leadership position, such as you, it's like the rest of the world, people are going to give up if you feel like there's no hope for the Amazon, say.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, no, look, it is like here, when I hear about Trump, I just don't want to read about it anymore. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, is that, by giving all this negative information, which, by the way, there is more to be optimistic than pessimistic. I always say that we are What we face today is more like the glass is half full, more than half empty.
Yep.
Of course, major challenges, but also, you know, uh, I trust that new generations will find the way to. So you know I don't see any other way. I get really upset when I see all these news about there's a million species in a verge of extinction and these and that. It's like, man, we will adapt in some ways. It's not the end of the world. If you ask your grandfather about how it was, 100 years ago or 80 years ago, the world was very different, and the world will be very different in 50 years from now. No question about it. But it's not that the world is ending. It still is a beautiful world, and a number of things that still to be appreciated and conserved and cherished.
I can't tell you how good it is for me to hear you say that, because I often say that to myself, and that's a big thing I have on this podcast is like, hey, there's a lot of negativity. You mentioned Trump. There's a lot of environmental negativity around him, or Bolsonaro. I mean, there's a lot of, they've almost actively have disdain for the environment. But you got to be positive.
All these, in the last few days, there is all this UN thing and the Greta Thunberg movement. And when I first heard her works, I was kind of like, that's a wrong message.
Oh, wow.
Well, I appreciate that all is happening, but I didn't like when she started saying, I'm in panic. You should be in panic. And I'm like, fuck. When you're in panic is when you make the worst decisions. So anyway, I'm very much against, this doomsday approach to things. I think it's a bad strategy. It may work only for a few days, but then after that, it's like, it's totally fucked up.
Well,
And there is no hope. The lungs of the Amazon, the lungs of the world, 20% of the oxygen is produced in the Amazon. And if there is no forest, we're going to be lacking oxygen. That's the biggest bullshit I ever heard. That's totally wrong. And there is a lot of information that is managed and it's totally wrong. Like, for example, 15% of the fresh water, it comes from the Amazon. That's totally wrong. I mean, it's 0.2%, there are a lot of, there is some information that is manipulated. I don't think it helps us. I can understand why it is said, is to highlight the importance, but I think we can be smarter than that, Anyway, don't get me started with that because, I've been working in this for so long and frankly, I try different things and I'm realizing that, that's not a way to go.
Well, what do you think is the approach that works? Like, I get it while people will spread a lot of that information, misinformation, but what do you think is the right way to do it?
Lately, I mean, the truth is that there is no one way, there is many ways, and we have to do this in a more, I guess, careful way.
Gotcha.
Lately I'm relying more on values. Even though you may say, well, but economics is what really runs the world. But truly speaking, if we stick to economics only, we lose the war because you cannot compete with the millions and millions and billions that are producing always. But if you think more about this is the world you want to live, think about the fact that we eat every week 5 grams of plastic.
Yeah.
Every week we ingest 5 grams of microplastics in our body. The equivalent of a credit card.
Wow.
When you think about that, you think like, is this a world you want to live? So more and more I'm relying on actually the values of actually what is really quality of life. And it is not a luxury of an elite. I think it's something that touches everybody. Also, I believe that even the involvement of faith, and by the way, I'm an atheist, but I think the involvement of faith into the appreciation of the natural world is essential. So anyway, where I'm going is that we need a multidisciplinary approach that actually touches different sides of humanity. I don't know if that's going to work, but I tell you that the other things don't work either. I think in the sense that we need to be actually more sensitive about different values that people have. and the same goes also. We have to deal with economics. In some cases, the economics is the main reason. I mean, look at what climate change is. For example, the rise of sea level is happening today. I mean, this is a purely economics issue. We have to deal also with issues of human rights, children, and so on. So it's a faceted, I guess, multi-angle approach that we have to apply. But it's not only sticking to some aspects of it.
Yeah, and I agree. You got to, this is such a big issue. You've got to tackle it from a few different ways, like you were mentioning, just values.
And we have strong arguments for that. I was just looking at the news about today. For example, it was released, a report on the state of the oceans. And man, when you come to think about it, most of the in coastal areas is where most people live. I'm from Peru, and Peru is one of the biggest fisheries in the world. And when you talk to Peruvians about the fish that we use, that is our identity, that we use to make ceviche, makes us so proud. And with overfishing and pollution and so on, we're not going to have that. That's what you want to have. And that's what mobilizes people when something touches them in their values, in their identity, and things that are a bit more profound than probably their pockets.
Yeah.
And the Amazon is a great subject in the sense that it's the biggest biodiversity in the planet.
Right.
And again, it's what kind of world do you want to live in? Live a world which is full of European sparrows or starlings. You need other values, and biodiversity is part of it. So anyway, the Amazon is a place where I have been centralizing my efforts for the reason that in the length of your time, there is where I can have more impact. I guess in my lifetime, in terms of assuring, I guess a natural patrimony for the planet.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of the motivation in working in the Amazon. And if you ask the question, why Andes Amazon? Well, it's that confluence of the Andes. The Andes is, the mountain range in South America with the Amazon, where most of life is concentrated in those areas that are in a gradient, altitudinal relief. And that's the part where I've been devoting the last probably 25 years of my life in trying to protect as much as possible, with great success so far.
Yeah. Let's talk about the successes. What have you seen has resonated the most in your 25 years of working, in and around the Amazon?
Yeah, in the Amazon. By the way, I am 61 right now, and I've been working in this since I was 14. I started as a young activist. It's a crazy story. But anyway, it's a story for a book type of Garcia Marquez, full of magical realism. It's a different times.
Man,
especially, coming from Peru, where it's a total different reality. It's an alternative reality. Anyway,
I've been to Peru a few years ago, and I could, not even 60 years ago, but just 3, and it is completely. It's a different world. It's incredible. You feel like I'm an atheist too. You feel like you're close to heaven, whatever that is. It's an incredible country.
I mean, there's Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
I tell you.
100%.
So the reason as I tell you, I was lured into the Andes Amazon when I started doing my doctoral thesis. Or I started working with animals. I was a bird guy. But then sooner than later, I was more driven into what is called community ecology, which is basically ecological systems that include mammals, plants, birds. I mean, you name it, everything, including humans. And then I started working more on policy and economics. And today, after these decades, I don't know if I consider myself again a biologist, because even though I read papers all the time and I'm very much up to date to the latest literature, scientific literature, but my work is mainly to be I guess a conservation, what's the right word? This kind of directing conservation in a way to analyze what is working and what doesn't work. You asked me, what has been done and what's the progress. When I started this, we had a very, very, I would say, weak protected area system. And let me start saying that protected areas is the cornerstone of conservation, especially the large ones with connectivity. This is the areas where you have natural ecosystems working as they should be.
Gotcha.
And what you see today, compared to when I started in the 70s, it's day and night. Today we have countries with very solid systems, and more than that is institutionality.
Yeah.
Presence of and the biggest change I would say is that in terms of society progress is day and night. When I started, we were 5 guys.
Yeah.
And today I'm part of a couple of awards events. Like for young conservationists. I'm appalled to see the number of young people who are really cool, doing really amazing work. And the times when I put myself 40 years ago, we were like just 5 guys. And today there is a whole universe of people in Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Brazil, really, really making a change. And that's what is, to me, one of the greatest changes that makes me more optimistic than ever. So it is the progress we had in protecting areas, key areas. I mean, you put it together, it is about 40% of the Amazon is under some sort of legal protection.
Right.
And 40%, you're talking about hundreds of millions of acres. It's a huge area. And when I started, it was probably in the order of 3 or 4%.
Oh, wow.
So the progress has been humongous.
Yeah.
That's why I feel optimistic. So anyway, that's kind of a summarize of where I see that today is a reason to be optimistic more than pessimistic.
Yeah, and that's what people don't, focus on. While I think it is important to say, hey, deforestation it's increasing, it's going a little bit faster than it has been in the past. Let's also focus on the positive. Hey, on the flip side, we have more protected land than we ever have. Like you said, 40%, and that number's growing.
Brian, today there is more forest than 20 years ago.
Wow. In the Amazon itself?
In the Amazon too.
Wow.
What has happened is that there were some waves of deforestation. 2006, for example, was a horrible year because of market fluctuations in soy and cattle and so on. And many areas that were deforested were left aside. And today, actually, there is more forest. The Amazon is probably not the example, but in the terms of worldwide, today there is more forest than before. Countries like Costa Rica, for example, today have more forest than 20 years ago. Basically because areas that have been deforested were left alone and they are regenerating by themselves.
Gotcha.
And nature is really resilient, more than what we think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it will find a way. I mean, that's one initiative that I know people have is like reforestation. While it's difficult, I know people have, talked about that. But I know you have this, what is the term of avoided reforestation?
Yeah, well, there is the term is called avoided deforestation, right? Basically, it's all the kinds of initiatives that don't involve deforestation. Basically, is if there is agricultural development or whatever, it is using already degraded lands. And there is a whole movement that is called the restoration movement. Basically, are investing big amounts of money into bringing areas that were degraded back into, into standing forests and also into, functional ecosystems. But I've been also leading a movement, quite controversial, that is called avoided restoration. Because in my mind, it is a way much better investment to protect existing forests than investing money into restoring areas that have been degraded. If you compare the amount of land that is being cut compared to the amount of land that is being restored, the amount of land that is being cut is much greater than the one restored, and the cost of restoration is very high. It's not cheap. So, as part of my effort with this Amazon Fund, what we do is mainly to protect standing forests before the standing forest is in peril or is degraded or is deforested. That's our main purpose. Is protecting land under different types of strategies before other forces act upon and degrade it or deforest it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you just mentioned some of the reasons why the forest is cut down to begin with. You were talking about cattle grazing, also soy. When you said it really took a big hit in 2006. What are other reasons that the Amazon kind of gets?
When one says the Amazon, one imagines the Amazon is one solid continuum. And it is not. Number one, the Amazon is divided among 8 countries. Well, 9 if you consider French Guiana a country, but it's not a country, right? It's a colony of France. But it is 8 countries where the Amazon forest belongs to. Sure, Brazil is probably something in the order of 70 or 65% of it, 70% of it. It's the biggest chunk.
Wow.
But the reality of what you see, for example, in Colombia, is quite different than the reality you see in Bolivia, or the reality you see in Acre in Brazil, or what you see in Pará, in the other side of Brazil, or the Amazon in Brazil. And second, it is such a dynamic world that what used to be a threat, it is not anymore. And in the last 20 years, some threats have appeared that they were not threats before. For example, in one of the areas where I spent a lot of time is in Madre de Dios in Peru, which is the border between Bolivia, Peru, and Brazil. It's in the southeastern Peru. And this area is known today because it's one of the study cases for illegal gold mines.
Yes.
You see that in the media here and there. But I've been working there since the 80s, and gold mining is only probably started in the year 2008.
Oh wow!
So it is only is 11 years old. Before 11 years ago, that was not an issue. So the reason I mention this is because problems of today are not necessarily the problems of yesterday. Neither will be the ones of tomorrow. I can give you a summary of what is the problem in Colombia, which is different than the one in Peru, which is different than the one in Bolivia, and is different than the one in Ecuador, or different than the one in southwestern Brazil or northern. It's just every area has a different. But if you were going to summarize, what is the main cause of deforestation today? But I highlight the word today because I told you 2006 was a major year of deforestation, but that was because Brazil opened up the industry of soy and cattle, and that was huge amount of land that was degraded because of that. But today is not. The main reason why the forest is cut today is what is called the expansion of agriculture, which is basically an handwork of people cutting small chunks of forest. So it is not that it used to be 10 years ago where most of the deforestation was these enormous areas like, say, 100,000 acres or no. Today is mainly something in the order of 10 acres at once. It's small advances. And depends on where you are. The drivers are different. But most of them are related to one factor, which is roads. Access. So if you say, what is the main driver of deforestation today? Is access, is roads. And the roads come with settlements, people basically invading and land squattering. In countries like Colombia, for example, today, it is believed that 70% of deforestation in the Amazon is related to land squattering, basically land speculation. In Peru, the numbers are unknown, but in a big extent, when you see deforestation, it follows roads. And by the way, in relation to what we were talking before about the fires today, when you look at what they call the the heat centers, the places where most of fires are happening, look at them and all of them are following roads.
So you got to.
So development of infrastructure is the main driver. And even though you may think that you need infrastructure in order to create development and so on, but the problem is that the governance is very weak and basically is a low-hanging fruit. And corruption is also widespread.
Gotcha. So roads is the big issue that, anytime you see a road, that's probably for a reason to develop, to pull down, to cut
or
down.
Mafias.
Or what?
Mafias try to access, forest for logging. Many cases corruption related to contracts will have nothing to do with the utility of the roads. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I can give you many examples of different types of illnesses on that sense. But roads is a generality.
So what? And this is probably a tough question to answer too, or just a lot of different answers. But what countries do you find? Probably got to take Brazil out of there because Brazil right now with Bolsonaro isn't very responsive. But what countries do you find are the most responsive, or the ones that are working to protect the Amazon?
All right. I mean, I can give you an answer of what is today, right? But it wasn't that a year ago. Gotcha. Let me give you an example. Peru, for example, has had a really good policies and good momentum, and still is. A very strong constituency at the municipal, at the regional levels. In Peru, the countries are divided in regions. It's kind of states, but it's not a federal country. But they have certain level of autonomy. And the level of sophistication in these regions is quite high now, and they are actually very much into protecting watersheds and into protecting their own microclimates and also protecting forests because they are seeing, gains, for example, tourism, different types of sources of exportation of non-timber forest products and so on. So anyway, Peru is having, I would say, a very steady progress. Brazil was not bad until, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. In the last few years has been going downhill, and now with Bolsonaro is going downhill steep. Bolivia is also in very deep trouble. However, I see at a municipal level very good intentions and very good progress. Ecuador is coming back. It was very bad until a couple years ago when President Correa left. There is a new guy, Moreno, and he's actually having a better attitude and he's coming back. Colombia, and in the last years of President Santos, in the last 2 years, actually it was very progressive. This government of President Duque is still ambiguous. In fact, it's not really having much, balls to confront different mafias. So it depends. I would say Peru is now heading in the turns. Now, in Brazil, it also varies according to the place of Brazil. Brazil is a huge country, right? It's the size of the United States, and there is a federal country. So some states, like Amazonas states, actually are pretty progressive. Acre, which is in the southern part of the Amazon, has been also very progressive. Right now, it's kind of weak, but it varies quite a bit. It's hard to tell, which country. It is more a photograph of the moment. It varies according to different leaderships. I tell you, if Evo Morales wins in Bolivia, big trouble. If he's running, by the way, for the 4th time. If he wins again, big trouble. Bolsonaro is big trouble. I would say Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, kind of stable, more or less.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And what do you think is going to happen with Bolsonaro?
Today I spent 30 minutes listening to his speech in the UN. He spoke yesterday, in the UN in New York, and today I just wanted to listen to him. What he said, as opposed to what you read. When you read the environmentalist web pages, oh my God, Bolsonaro is such a beast. But when you read the Brazilian newspapers, they praise him.
Right.
You know, so I just wanted to hear. And the problem with Bolsonaro is that he comes with a notion of a country that is very different than what it used to be. You know, number one is he comes with a very nationalistic approach, in the sense that the Amazon, the Brazilian Amazon, it belongs to Brazil, and if you're coming to tell me that it belongs to humanity, dream on.
Yeah.
You know, and that is playing very well to him. And Brazilians are, by the way, very nationalistic. You know, if you know, the Brazilian way is very xenophobic as well as very nationalistic. And it's a great nation, you know, and that's probably why it's so great. But that's characteristics of countries. So this nationalistic approach of Bolsonaro is playing very well to his basis, but also he comes from a military background, and they have been very much under the philosophy of colonizing. It's kind of like the search for the West in the old times in the U.S. So they are very much into securing their borders. Brazil is for Brazilians, and also let's colonize the Amazon. And the other factor is that he doesn't like the indigenous movement. He doesn't like Indians.
Yeah.
You know, and he believes, and you can argue against it, you know, but there's a reason for him to say this, is that the Indians have already too much land. And you look carefully, the Indian movement, the indigenous peoples control something in the order of probably 18 or 19% of the Amazon in Brazil, but they represent less than 1% of the population.
Oh, wow.
You know, so when you think about it, it's like, wait a second, you know, in the minds of Brazilians, it's like, you know, is that right? You know, you may argue against it, but anyway, he comes with the idea that Indians are like anybody, like you or me. They have their dreams, and they also want to develop. And so, why not they do mining? Why not they do soy? You know, and even though there may be some populations that may want that, some small part of the Indians, most of the Indians want to be in their land and just hunt their monkeys and you know, plant their manioc. You know, there's quite a large people who their aspirations are more very traditional.
Sure.
But he is very much against that. So the problem with Bolsonaro is that he basically dismantled institutions that were supporting Indians and supporting conservation of forests. He cut their budgets to health, you know, and replaced the leadership with military people or his allies. And also, he also told the colonists, saying, do whatever you want, and I'm going to close my eyes.
Yeah.
So impunity is rampant. And that was the message. Even though he didn't phrase it in that way, but that was the message.
Yeah.
The number of environmental violations and fines, the violations have like orders of magnitude increase, and the fines are zero. In other words, the enforcement of environmental crimes is zero. So the message is low-hanging fruit, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
No wonder why we have so many fires.
Yeah. I mean, Bolsonaro sounds exactly like Trump. Like exactly like what we've got going on.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, Bolsonaro is worse, but I would say Trump is more embarrassing.
Embarrassing is the perfect word.
Yeah, that's, I guess, you know, it's just such a clown. But Bolsonaro is not far from that, I tell you.
Well, and that's an important point, is like you mentioned earlier, but like, hey, Brazil, their national sovereignty, they feel like they should be able to build this land, you know, build on the Amazon, because that's what we did. We built upon the land that we had. So why can you do that, North America, but we can't?
Yeah, and when you think about development in Europe or in the US, basically Brazil is buying their things, and it's kind of like if we're going to protect the Amazon, there has to be a quid pro quo too.
Yeah.
If they want to, and that doesn't happen. It was ridiculous, when in the G7 when the president of France, saying that we're going to donate $25 million. Give me a break. This is pocket money. This is stupid. In fact, when I read that, my first thought was, these people don't have any understanding of Brazilian idiosyncrasy. And as I said, next morning, Bolsonaro said, you can show that in your ass. I don't need your money. That's bullshit. They just have no understanding. The whole thing is just a media blitz. To deal with Brazilians, you have to understand what is their psychology, what's the identity of Brazilians, and unfortunately, several of these leaders are just for the cameras.
So you think a lot of that, international financial aid to Brazil and to the Amazon was for show? Like it wasn't enough to really do anything substantial.
Oh no, it doesn't make a dent at all.
Wow.
The changes are more of a different sort, are more political.
Wow.
For example, if you had, in the same way as I hate to use this example, but in the same way as Trump uses tariffs for pushing a country to do one thing or to do the other, tariffs also should be used, for example, to support forest conservation.
Gotcha.
I give you a better treatment if you, comply with, to say lower your emissions.
Yeah.
And things like that. It's political. So all what you saw was, in my mind, it's a big show. Now, of course, I had to look also for the bright side of things, right? It suddenly put the Amazon in the front of attention. That's the good side of it. It also, in some ways, encouraged youth to start thinking, maybe I should think about it. I don't know. There are some positive sides of it, but I just, as you notice, I didn't like it that much in the way it was manipulated and driven. I just came from Bolivia, and I was telling you that I was looking at what happened in Bolivia, and Bolivia was hardly in the news. The real disaster is there. It wasn't in Brazil.
Wow, really?
It was more in the south. There is where the disaster was. Not out there, but of course, for other reasons, Brazil was a better target.
Yeah, and we have the same thing going on right now in Indonesia. Like there's smog in Singapore and in parts of the Philippines because of Indonesian, rainforests that are being burned down. We're not hearing much about that, at least compared to what we heard about the Amazon. So while the attention is good, it does feel like sometimes, it might be a little bit skewed.
One of the points that actually you were wondering at some point of, talking a bit more about what is a tipping point.
Yeah.
And this is a real thing to consider. Today, out of the 100% of the forest in the Amazon, about, I would say, above 80% is still forest intact. 80%, that's a lot. You're talking about something in the order of 600 million hectares.
Yeah.
It's humongous. It's huge. However, that means that the deforestation accounts to probably something in the order of 18 to 20%.
Gotcha.
And as I told you before, it follows the roads. In the case of Brazil, most of the deforestation is along what is called the BR-163. It's a road that crosses Pará and goes all the way to the border with Peru. It's in the interoceanic highway. Anyway, but the 18% has been already degraded or cut. The climatic modeling, very sophisticated science, very reliable science these days, predicts that the role that forest itself has, in particular the Amazon, of creating its own rain and recycling, and also as a regulator of world weather, may be altered when we get to what is called a tipping point. It's a point where when the forest continuity is disturbed, the capacity to create your own rain, basically rainfall, evaporation, rainfall, evaporation, is disrupted. Then it screws up the whole movement of clouds, and that becomes to be like a snowball in the sense that once you don't have rain, there are more dryness in the forest, and the less water in the forest it means that the forest is more prone to fires. So once it is not wet anymore, it becomes to be prone to fires. So then basically you get into a kind of like a self-feeding circle, and that's what is called the tipping point. And the estimates are that when we get probably in between 20 to 25% of the forest cut down, then is when we'll start altering this self-generating rain self-generating capacity, and that may basically snowball, and that's a real concern. That's why, as I was telling you before, one of our main mottos as the Andes Amazon Fund is to provide with a land use legal capacity to avoid areas to be cut down, and also looking for more. The word is continuity. No, is more like corridors where clouds pass, and go in the higher elevations, and then bring rain back, the rivers. Basically, trying to protect the system. The more that we protect the forest, the more safe we are against reaching this tipping point. And that's one issue that has been in the news a lot lately, is that if we continue in the trend that we are, we may be probably getting to a point where is no return.
Wow.
We have some time, but it's not far.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying, we'd have to be at 25%, and we're at 18 to 20% right now. So that doesn't seem far, especially on the pace that Brazil's on.
The Amazon is estimated to be something in the order. I mean, I speak in hectares. I know that in America people talk about acres, and so I have to make a translation. But
that's all right. I get it.
An acre equals 2.4. A hectare equals 2.4 acres. The Amazon is something in the order of 800 million hectares. So multiply that by 2.4. Today, deforestation in Brazil accounts for something in the order of 800,000 hectares. Equals, it will be about 2 million acres.
Wow.
And again, the Amazon is something in the order of, the whole Amazon is something in the order of, I would say, 1.6 billion acres, something like this. So there is still forest, so that the deforestation is high. And the problem is that with Bolsonaro's policies, those 800,000 hectares may be 1.5 million next year. Mm-hmm. The worst time ever in history in Brazil was, as I was telling you before, in 2006, where annually there was a 3 million hectares of deforestation, which equals something in the order of 8 million acres. And that was bad.
Wow, yeah.
We have to avoid going back into that. And the concern today is that Bolsonaro is heading into that direction.
What is being done to try and prevent Bolsonaro and his policies from going back to that 2006 era?
Number one is, Bolsonaro has certain level of power. It's like saying Trump in the U.S. States have also to some level autonomy. Right. So what we do is basically work at the state level. So we are not dealing with Bolsonaro and his crowd. We're dealing with the governors in state level. There are states like, for example, Amazonas, which is it's humongous. It's huge. It's probably, my guess is 1/3 of the whole Amazon. One state. And we're working with the governor in order to create protected areas, in order to manage areas, in order to strengthen community organizations to manage the forest better, as opposed to say, increase, cattle ranching, which is not really that profitable. So anyway, that's what we do. I must be honest that Andes Amazon Fund is not that active in Brazil.
Yeah.
We are more active in the Andean Amazonian countries: Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia. I would say those are the 4 countries that where we put most of our efforts. We have some action in Brazil, but it's not really our main focus. And the reason is because, the more, you have to concentrate. Number one, our resources are not unlimited, and also, the Amazon is big. There is a level of capacity. In Andes Amazon Fund, so far, Andes Amazon Fund, in the last 4 years, we have supported organizations, national and as well as civil society, to protect, I think, in the order of, my guess is 20-something million acres in key areas. And what I mean with key areas means those areas where biodiversity levels are much higher, or areas that are more important for water catchment. And it's not a small thing, it's a big area. We just got one new area in Bolivia, which is about 3 million, no, it's about 4.5 million acres. Huge, and an amazing place.
Right.
So anyway, we are one of the ones that are working on this, and we are not the only ones. There are foundations who are also supporting similar work. I guess what makes us different than the others is that we're very specialized in that. One of our main focus is to create protected areas of the different sorts, be indigenous, be regional, municipal, private, you name it. Different types, for every country.
Yeah, and you guys also work with indigenous people in that area, not just
Yeah.
The ecosystems themselves.
And indigenous peoples, and also we work with and contact indigenous peoples. And you may wonder, what the heck is that? We are exploring Mars, right? But as we speak, there is something in the order of 100 different tribes with their own language,
Wow.
who live in Stone Age in the Amazon, that they don't have any contact with white people. And again, they have their own language, their own culture. And the problem is that since these people have never had any contact with Western society, their immunological system is very weak,
Right.
to resist our diseases. So if you come in the contact with a group and you have a cold, you may kill a whole culture. So part of our work also involves supporting the Peruvian government, as well as in Colombia, to strengthen the national strategies, and also set aside areas where these groups are known to exist. Of course, the policies never go and contact them. It's more leave them alone until that someday they will want to come out. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, you don't really think about that. At least
it's crazy. So our work involves different strategies, different types of partnerships. It's not only with the ministries of environment. We also work with the ministries of culture. We deal with these Indian affairs. We work also with ministers of agriculture, also with ministers of energy, because some countries need oil, and you have to find a way of also allowing certain levels of development, but under best practices and so on. So it's quite I would say it's quite a variety of different things that we're working on.
Yeah, that's and that's what you're saying. Like, you only have so many resources. There's only so much you can really focus on. So you've got to focus on your expertise.
I tell you, it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's very frustrating, but when we have progress like the one I just told you in Bolivia, it's a very rewarding type of thing. It's the right thing, and we're working, with people, with governments, and different constituencies, and so it is not a mandate from the West, not at all. It is actually local initiatives, and that's also good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you want to see, right? You want to see people protecting their own areas. You don't want to see Europe and America meddling in, certain local areas. You want them to protect it themselves, and I'm sure that they do. It's just a matter of how do we do this, and how do we also maintain jobs and maintain an economy while
the environment. There is a reality you cannot deny. It is not ideal to think that you're going to have soldiers protecting an area. That's right. That's far from ideal. In the beginning, in certain cases, you have to use force. It's true, but the ideal is that at the end, it's local communities, local people that are keeping the areas in good shape. Not necessarily that they're using them, but at least being the gatekeepers, basically.
Well, yeah, and you don't want America or any other country that's already developed their land to go and say, well, you guys can't do that. You guys can't develop your land. You want it to come from the inside out.
Yeah. In the beginning, we were talking about, what have you seen changing in your lifetime? I tell you, in the beginning, it was more about cute animals, cute furry animals. In some ways, it was more like, I guess the elites and today it is a local initiative. It is a guy that lives in this forest or in this mountain that tells you, I want to protect the forest here because there is where the water that I drink or I use for my crops comes from. They understand it better than we do, and it is in many ways it is their initiatives, and that's very rewarding actually to see that people actually understand better what you think. So it is not necessarily fighting against the current. It's helping people to do the right thing.
So I love this. I love the fact that you're very positive about it, but you're also very, realistic about the issues that are going on. What would be if you wanted to tell people 3 things about the Amazon, what would you tell them? What would you say, these are the issues, these are the opportunities, this is what we're up against?
Yeah, I would actually, I don't know if there is an easy answer for that. What I would tell to the Peruvians or the Bolivians would be different than I would tell to American public. There is always the question, what can you do to help, right? When I talk to Peruvians, for example, or Bolivians, my strategy is, which is what I really feel, is that this is our identity. It's a natural patrimony. You feel proud of Machu Picchu, or the Inca culture. Well, you gotta feel proud about your Amazon. And this is something that is an issue of identity. And to me, that's a very powerful message. People get it. But if I talk, of course, with a politician, I have to tell them, man, this is not a expenditure. Right. This is an investment. And I cite several examples, where nature actually brings you more money than say fast cash crops. Just to give you an example, we did an study of tourism in protected areas, tourism in national parks. We found that the movement, the amount of money that is moved by tourism in protected areas is something in the order of 5 times higher than the logging industry. So it is way, way much better to keep the forest standing than chopping it off, because you get every year, $1.2 billion. That's language for politicians. So it depends. So if you ask me, why would you tell an American, why should we save the Amazon? And I would say, this is a world that you want to live. It's a world that is rich in biodiversity, a world that inspires, and a world that also, it produces clean water and clean air, and some stability. It is more about, what you want to leave for next generations. It is more a values. Of course, I can use the other arguments like, oh, it's the lands of the world, all that, but I've tried to use that because number one, is not true, and second, I don't think it actually convinces anybody. But I go more for the values, and when people say, what can I do? I don't know, that was your second question.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, like what would you tell someone who is watching the news and thinks that the Amazon there's no hope for it, or that it's completely being demolished by the forest fires and by the deforestation?
Yeah, I would say, it is not. We still have 80% of it, and we have time. And my message is that, number one is get informed, pass the message, and support those who are in the trenches. And second, being a Washingtonian, I live in DC. What I tell is also have some influence in your representatives. There are several cases where political action has changed things in the right direction. For the Amazon, there are a number of examples, but more than anything is get informed and support. Pass the message and support people who are working in for environmental purposes, and particularly in the Amazon. My message is things are not as bad as they look like. We have time. It's not doomsday. And regarding climate change, frankly, I'm more and more convinced that as much as we are concerned about emissions, we have to be concerned about adaptation. We already screw up. And second, it is not just a matter of replacing your gas car for a Prius or electric. It's also about your consumption.
Yeah.
You have to be more responsible. It is an everyday thing. It doesn't matter if you think that you're going to make a change or not. It is a personal attitude. That's kind of what I say all around.
I love hearing that, and I really do. I mean, I got to be honest. When I read, when I was reading about the report, the, what we were talking about earlier, the one about the tipping point. I mean, it's hard. It's hard not to feel defeated. It's hard not to feel like it's all over. It's a lost cause. So I appreciate you setting the record straight.
Yeah. And one thing I tell them is go and see it. Go and see it, and then you understand better. All this discussion. If you haven't been in the Amazon, there are many places that can give you the right place where you want to see the real thing. But even you don't have to go to Peru or Brazil or even going to Costa Rica to see tropical forests. It just blows your mind.
So I got married last year, and my wife and I have always wanted to go to see the mountain gorillas of Uganda and the Congo.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to Uganda in November. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because the mountain gorillas have the only positive trend of any primates, because that area is really embracing sustainable travel. So you're saying that there could be something, a similar initiative with the Amazon itself.
Oh yeah, no, I mean every place has a different solution.
Right.
There is no silver bullets, and that's part of the challenge is finding the right solution. And by the way, the mountain gorillas is in my bucket list.
Oh man,
I don't know when, but I will do it.
Yeah,
eventually.
Absolutely, yeah. We will. I'll let you know when we get back. It'll be in mid-November. But I'm so excited. It's our bucket list too. And next on our bucket list is the Amazon. So I'll have to reach out to you for some good, travel advice.
I can tell you some advice of the good places where you see the real thing, and also you see some of the problems. It's important to put it in the context. It's very informative. I can tell you that, offline.
Nice. Well, Enrique, I mean, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible. I appreciate you, setting the record straight. I appreciate your positivity, and I appreciate the important work you've been doing for decades. I think it's invaluable to the world, and to these specific areas. So, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, man. This has been great.
No problem. It's just, you have to keep always being optimistic. Remember, the glass is full, is not half empty. Always pass the positive message, and we're gonna, we're gonna make it. We're gonna win.
Thanks for joining. If you liked that episode, feel free to rate, view, and subscribe. That actually really helps. If you haven't seen it yet, take a look at the accompanying blog. Don't forget yourboots.com, where you can read more and see photos for all the interviews. Until next time, take care.